I'm Matthew DeBolt.
And I'm Sarah Gardner.
And this is Staying on Beat, your source for all things Indian Valley Band.
Continuing on the topic of marching band, this episode is about the competition show. So our band is a competition band, which means that we perform competitively against other bands in our area. Each year, we have a new competition show. Most competition shows tell a story. For example, we've had, in the years that I've been in band, we've done Lanuba, which it was a circus kind of show. Phoenix, it told a story about a bird, and then the bird died, and then the bird got reborn. Engines, that was a story. But this one, for our 2024 season, our show is called Artworks.
It's all about what makes art. It's how art's created and how art works. We have 4 movements in this show. Movement 1 is Artworks. Movement 2 is Lines. Movement 2 is Balance. And Movement 4 is Colors.
We have 2 soloists this year, Rose Glazier on the tenor saxophone and AJ Sweeney on the bass drum.
Our props are designed by Matt Hopkins, per usual. We have paint buckets that are going to be used by marchers on the field. They have little fabric inside, and the marchers will throw the fabric out of the paint bucket to make a splash effect. There are signs that say our show and have color palettes, and then there's the big red dot that our soloists stand on. Something that makes this show special is we made our own drill this year, and by we, Mr. Davis. Mr. Davis found a software, and he created all of our drill and all of our visuals with the help of students such as me, Lily Johnson, and Alexi Menifee.
Our band has this one thing. After every spring concert, they would do a reveal of what the next competition show is going to be. And they'll have all like the marching kids will go, and like the parents, and then they'll go and they'll watch. And we have this whole like reveal video. But when I watched the reveal, if we're being completely honest here, I did not like the show from the reveal video. I just thought we have a voiceover, and I remember specifically telling myself that I do not like voiceovers. It would just annoy me after a while. But now as I start to play it, and like we're marching it, we're getting it on the show, I have turned out to love this show. Like, this show is possibly one of my favorites.
For me, I think this show works for what we have. It's asked more of us musically, which I've been looking for a little bit of a challenge in our music. But I will always miss Phoenix and that story that we told. But I'm glad that this has a better story to follow than some of the past years. I've always been a big fan of narrations, and this show finally has one. Overall, I think it's a decent show, and it'll be a good year.
We have visuals on the field that Mr. Davis also created and made, along with the help of a couple other students. One of our visuals that we are in the process of learning is our big visual during our, what we call the percussion break, where the percussion they're just enjoying their lives over there, and they're just playing. I think when you see it, it goes so well with the music, and I'm in love with the visual.
They use some drum corps visuals, so it's not easy stuff, but it's not going to be something that melts our face off, and it adds to the music definitely.
We're going to go on to interviewing Mr. Davis. We're going to have our first guest on our podcast, and that will be Mr. Davis. And we'll get right to that. For a little more insight on choosing the competition shows, we brought in Mr. Davis, one of our assistant directors of the marching band, and also the visual designer and drill writer of our show. So in choosing a competition show, what are you normally looking for?
So I think the main thing that we're looking for is just entertainment value. While we order our shows from publishing companies and writers that are on the internet, there's what we've been using for the last couple of years has been Randall Standridge. He wrote our last few shows. And basically, if I can listen to it multiple times and still be entertained and kind of get that point in time where it gets the juices flowing and kind of get your excitement level up, that's something that I'm going to be looking for, because especially this year, since I had to write the drill, I've probably listened to the show upwards of 300 to 500 times. So if I'm going to eventually get bored with it, it's not something that I'm going to want to work with. So it has to be entertaining. It has to be something that creates excitement, I think.
Right. When you were looking at different competition shows, what about artworks did you see or hear and be like, our band needs to do this?
So the other things that you have to think about is you have to think about what are our strengths as a band in pulling off a show. And we kind of come up with a list. So whenever I'm out there, listening on YouTube or going on the internet, and sometimes I'll send shows to Mr. Lenzer, sometimes I'll send them to all four of the directors, just because ultimately he has to be the one to approve the show, right? And so if he doesn't think our band is going to be able to pull it off musically, there's no point in even having any more discussion on it. But this show in particular is very heavily focused on percussion, which is a strong point of our group, and it also has a lot of options and opportunities for color guard work as well, which we also thought was going to be a huge benefit to our group this year. You have to kind of avoid the shows that have musical elements that you don't have the strength of. So we have a very strong brass section, but a smaller brass section. So that's something that you have to take into account. Our woodwind section is bigger, but also is very strong and powerful. So those elements you have to consider as well. So yeah, there's lots of different things to kind of take into account whenever you are deciding on the show that you are going to do. I mean, ultimately, the goal is that whatever you put out there on the field, it's going to be fun for your members, but also it's going to be entertaining, both musically and visually, to the audience and to the judges. So if the vision that you come up with is not something that excites you, it's probably not going to excite the crowd either. So those would be the ones to avoid.
And so after working with us and helping us learn the competition show, you had an idea in your mind of what you wanted our show to look like. After how many months? 3 months of us working on this, has our band brought your image or your idea of what you wanted the show? Has our band brought that to life?
I would say that we are well on our way. Some of the visual elements that I had envisioned, for instance in the fourth movement, which is, we haven't even shown that publicly yet. Whenever I went to Lily Johnson and Alexi Menifee and said, hey, can you create choreography for us? And I said, this is basically the feel that I want. This is the general look and idea that I want. You come up with something. And so after multiple versions of their choreography and us saying kind of, well, we like this aspect of what you've come up with, but this aspect, maybe change that a little bit. That's just kind of a microcosm of the show in general. That visual sequence in the fourth movement is pretty much exactly what I had envisioned in my head. And so the rest of the show is coming together kind of pretty much the same, the elements of the show where we come together with company fronts. I envisioned those even before I went into the software and started writing it. The sequences where we have double time marches or halftime marches, I envisioned that before I even went into the program. The other big moment where it's the weird two-step thing in the second movement where we're coming through in diagonals is da 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 da. That sequence I had in my head before I even designed it in the software. So I think you guys are doing an excellent job of bringing that to life so far, and I'm looking forward to see where we end up in November.
Absolutely.
Because at that point in time, you do the show one last time, and then whatever that last version is, you'll never perform it ever again. We put it away, and that is the best version of the show at that point. So that's what I'm looking forward to.
Yeah. All right. I think that answers all of my questions. Thank you for letting me interview you.
All right. Thanks, Sarah.
Okay, so we also brought in Mr. Lenzer, the head director of the marching band. So when Mr. Davis showed you the show he wanted, what was your first reaction?
Okay, so we were at the Sandy Valley football game. This is last fall. So this is how far ahead we start thinking about these shows. And Mr. Davis had sent me the show, and I'm listening to the show, and my very first thought is, we're going to need like 10 trumpets. We don't have 10 trumpets. I don't know how many trumpets we're going to have, but it's not going to be 10. And so I told him, you need a bunch of trumpets. And I knew that the show wasn't going to work unless we somehow adapted that. And so at first I told him no, and we started looking at other shows. And then eventually I told him, well, I could rewrite the music parts. And so that's what I did. So we ended up circling back to the show, and I told him, if you give me time to work on the wind parts, I can rewrite the clarinets specifically and the altos so that the trumpets don't get overwhelmed.
Got it. Okay. Do you think that the music matches well with the visual elements that Mr. Davis created, like the visuals that we have and the props that we have?
Yes. I think that Mr. Davis has done a really good job, especially for his first year, in picking apart where the impact moments happen in the music and visually representing them on the field. In fact, I think in some ways this is some of the best drill we've had since I've been here.
Interesting. And the last thing, do you think our marching band has brought the idea of artworks to life musically?
Absolutely. I do think that we've been pretty successful so far. Obviously, we have yet to hear what the judges have to say, but I think we've done a very good job short of actually painting the field those 4 colors, Marietta style. I think that we've done an excellent job of bringing artworks to life.
Okay. Thank you. So that was a little insight on how our competition show is chosen and the director's thoughts about our show. I'm Sarah, no Matthew, and this was Staying on Beat. Thanks for listening.